This short video will address the quadratic formula when you're not rounding your answers, but in fact simplifying radicals. Now I have an example on the right-hand side, 0 equals 3x squared plus 24x plus 47. And your task on these is going to be like any other. We're going to look for the discriminant, find the number of solutions, and then solve for x. But what's different here is that we're not going to use calculators to round our answers. We're going to keep our answers as precise as possible. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and run down through this process. The discriminant first is b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to go 24 squared minus 4 times 3 times 47. These numbers are quite big, so I'm going to go ahead and use a calculator to help solve this. 24 squared minus 4 times a times c is 12. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the discriminant equals 12, right? So discriminant equals 12. The number of solutions is going to be 2 because my discriminant is positive. And now we're going to go solve for x. So I've done two things already very quickly and solve for x. So my quadratic formula, x equals negative b. So the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of our discriminant over 2a. So let's plug some numbers in there. My b value is 24, and my a value is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So before I branch this off with a positive and a negative, which I can do, what I'm going to do is focus on simplifying a radical. And here's the radical that I'm going to simplify. That square root of 12, I want to simplify that. And I recognize that I can do that because 12 contains a factor that is a perfect square. In fact, the largest perfect square that makes up 12 is 4 times 3. So watch this. I could take the 12 out and write 4 times 3 because that's the same as 12. And if I can do that with the square root, I could technically do this as well. I could go ahead and separate this into the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. That should be the same thing. And then if I can do those two things, I could take the square root of 4 and get, well, 2 times 2 equals 4. Let's get rid of the dot there. So notice how I've simplified the square root. The square root of 12 became 2 times the square root of 3. Now I'm going to go ahead and answer this question with two different techniques. I'm going to go ahead and do it with well, not two different techniques. I'm going to give you the two different answers. Negative 24 plus 2 roots of 3 over 6, and negative 24 minus 2 roots of 3 over 6. And both of these might have a little bit of canceling out, so let's go ahead and see what we can do here. When I go to cancel, one thing that I have to keep in mind is if I'm going to cancel these, let's say I know they have a common 4, but these do not have a common 4. I'm not personally real inclined to do that. There are ways to do that as well, but if I want to keep it as this big fraction, I'm going to look for a common factor here that's also a common factor here. And notice what I'm looking at is not the stuff inside the radical. I'm looking for the multiplier or the coefficient outside of the radical. And those things all have a 2 in common. So what I'll do is I'm going to divide the 24, the 6, and the 2 all by 2. And I'm going to get negative 12, 1 times the square root of 3, so just the square root of 3, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now you could leave that as part of your answer. On the bottom side, you could go ahead and do the same concept. If you find a common one here and here, it's probably the same as the one on top. So same concept, negative 12 minus the square root of 3 over 3. And this would be a second answer. There's nothing wrong with those answers. They're perfectly acceptable, but you might find that a few people want them simplified a little bit more. If you want them simplified a little bit more, what you could do is take that same exact top, and I'll do it for the negative one as well. And instead of writing the entire thing divided by 3, what you do is you write the individual parts divided by 3. Now, if you get a chance, and then if you're able to simplify even more, go for it. Notice how the top one would be negative 4 plus. Now, very important here. This is, oops, where'd it go? This is not inside a radical symbol. This is inside a radical symbol, so you are not allowed to cancel those out. So what I'm going to get is square root of, wrong tool. What you're going to get is the square root of 3 over 3. And this would be a different way to write the answer. Now, could you have come up with that right off the bat? Probably, but I'm showing it a couple different ways, right? So here comes the negative version of this. You could have negative 4 minus the square root of 3 over 3. A couple different answers. So when you're actually writing your answers, you might write x equals negative 12 plus the root of 3 over 3, or x equals negative 12 minus the root of 3 over 3. That would be one way to write it. I'm not sure that that's the way Get More Math would like it. But sometimes you never know what Get More Math wants, so sometimes you have to try more than one thing. The other option would be write negative 4 plus the square root of 3 over 3, or x is negative 4 minus the square root of 3 over 3. That would be another alternative way to write your answer.